Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 551 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Evelyn, CEO of Greek University. I am a speaker and an author. Check out our sixth book. It's called I'm So Beautiful, It's Ridiculous: Unleashing and Promoting Strength, Self-Worth, and Real Sisterhood. That's available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Interesting fact, my next guest and I are both accounting majors. You might not think that based on what we do today, but I can assure you debits and credits, they are an excellent foundation for building anything that you like. And we don't need a tax accountant to do our taxes or to tell us how our organization is performing in real time. That gives us really excellent decision-making abilities on a day-to-day basis. And I share that with our audience because things will change as you move through life. Just listen to those little nudges that life will give you from time to time, pushing you closer to your true mission in life. It might not be completely visible on day one of your professional career, but just know that you're going to make a series of turns and trust that over time you're going to be able to use all of those skills that you've built in college towards something very meaningful. So stay patient, listen to those signs, and let's talk to our next guest who has a very meaningful and important role today. And he has brought real change to the way that fraternity and sorority moves forward over the next century. Jim Piazza is the father of Tim Piazza, who died as a result of a fraternity hazing event in February 2017. Jim and his wife Evelyn are natives of New Jersey and have become anti-hazing advocates since their son's passing. In that role, they are working with universities and national fraternities to make Greek life safer. Welcome to the show, Jim. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's very important that we talk about this as often as we possibly can. We have new members that are coming into our fraternities and sororities every 6 months. So if we haven't spoken to them about hazing prevention in 6 months, then we've never spoken to them. So it's really important that we continue this conversation. And I'm obviously very familiar with what happened to your son, Tim Piazza, at Beta Theta Pi at Penn State 8 years ago. For those who might not be familiar with it, such as some of the undergraduate students that are coming through today, tell our audience what happened on February 4th, 2017.
Yeah, well, it all started on really February 2nd of 2017, just 1 month after we as a family went to the Rose Bowl to see Penn State play USC. But, he got a phone call or he got a text message that basically said, be at the house, wearing blazer and khakis, and we're going to get you fucked up. And, he again, I didn't speak to him after that, but allegedly he was very concerned about getting that text. He and along with 13 other pledges went to the house not knowing what to expect, and what they encountered was a drinking obstacle course with various stations. And in a matter of 90 minutes, Tim had the equivalent of what they determined to be 18 drinks, which were on camera. Um, the event kind of took its way down to the basement. There was one of the brothers we think allegedly, was worried about Tim, so he brought him upstairs and sat him on a couch because he could see that Tim was losing his functions. And then he left Tim alone, unfortunately. And what the cameras tell us that Tim actually tried to leave the house, but he couldn't figure out how to open the door. So he went back to the basement steps and he fell down a flight of 18 steps. And the next thing the cameras pick up is four guys carrying his limp body and throwing him back on the couch. At that point, several people knew he needed help, but the leadership of the fraternity basically said, nah, he'll be fine, he'll sleep it off, even though he had bruises all over him. And throughout the night they were throwing stuff at him, putting water on him, beer on him, slapping him, and he never came to. They let him stay there overnight, and the next morning they found him in the fetal position down in the basement again. And they brought him back upstairs, and for 45 minutes they debated what they should do because they were concerned they were going to get in trouble because they had already been on probation. And finally somebody called 911, and the rest is history. He went to the hospital, and We got to see him barely alive, but I did ask the doctor at the time. I said, if they would have called for help, you know, last night sometime, would we have a different outcome here? And he said, yeah, absolutely, we would. So,
Oh, I mean, this is just absolutely heartbreaking. And I think the question that you asked the doctor is completely on point, which is just call and get help, because then we're not sitting here having this conversation without Tim by our side. And that's really the key. And even the latest hazing case in Louisiana at Southern University, same thing. I mean, instead of trying to change clothing and come up with stories that he was playing basketball and doing this or that, get him to the hospital immediately, because then maybe we're not having this conversation about somebody who's no longer on this planet.
right. Michael, it's become a playbook. I don't know if it's hopefully it's not a playbook that's being dispersed from the national organizations down to these chapters, but it's a playbook. A person goes down, they just throw them on a couch, they lay them there, they make up excuses, they try to change their clothes, and then the individual dies. It just it
It's
makes no sense.
heartbreaking.
It's not even humane.
No, it's heartbreaking. And I think it is to preserve their own innocence. I think it's them trying to preserve the organization and not get into trouble. And so we'll talk a little bit more about how we can potentially avoid that. But in this particular case, I saw that Brendan Young, Daniel Casey, they both pled guilty to 14 counts of hazing, single count of reckless endangerment back in July of 2024. Brendan was the president of the chapter. Daniel was the pledge master and also the vice president. They received 2 to 4 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. Now, this is a really difficult question for the parent of somebody who has passed. But do you feel that justice was served in your son's case?
Well, first of all, I don't think justice is ever served in a situation like this. Do I think they set out to kill Tim when they started this? No, but they knew what they were doing was problematic. They knew they had issues in the past, and they even have text messages between themselves that say if something goes wrong, we're fucked. So they knew there was a high amount of danger with what they were doing. But I don't think they intended to kill Tim by any means. They basically pled out to all of the remaining charges that were against them. There were so many more charges that were originally assessed, but there was really no case law in Pennsylvania, and frankly, you had 20 defense attorneys against one prosecutor, and we went through 8 different judges, and frankly, I don't think the judges really understood the magnitude of what happened. A couple of them weren't even attorneys, and they dismissed a lot of the more serious charges. I believe if those other charges would have stuck, they would have been convicted of them. Even the judge at sentencing said, um, "I've sentenced people to much harsher sentences with much less of a crime, but I was basically left with only the remaining charges that were there, and I had to follow the sentencing guidelines for those charges." So that last judge, I think he got it.
Mhm. I mean, I think we should talk more about this, because I think this is part of the problem when I look at hazing cases over time, is that the judges, whether, again, we can figure out why that is, but they don't have the tools, or they are not actually prosecuting these college age men the way that they should, in a way that is going to deter other students from doing the same thing. Now, you were able to get the Timothy Piazza anti-hazing law in place. That includes a felony graded offense when there is a serious injury or a death, like what happened to Tim. And they would have received harsher penalties if that was in place when Tim died in 2017. So, do you believe that harsher penalties going forward is going to deter students from engaging in this behavior? And what role does the judge play in all of this?
Yeah, it's interesting. The judge even commented that had that law been in place, we would be talking about a much different situation, much different sentencing. The issue becomes law enforcement. Yeah, do I think stiffer penalties will become a deterrent? For sure, if the law. So prosecutors, they need to bring up the charges. They need to pursue those charges. Then people will start seeing the teeth. And judges need to understand what hazing really is. And then people will understand. Parents will talk to children if they start seeing, young men and women going to jail and having to spend fortunes of, their retirement money to defend their kids. But until that happens, it's not much of a deterrent because it's kind of like, all right, yeah, there's a law, but there's a speeding law, but who cares about it, So unless they use the law, it, it's deterring. Once kids and parents start seeing students going to jail, it's going to change the ball game. But just as an example, at Penn State, Center County, Pennsylvania, there's been a lot of hazing cases or situations since Tim died. We are not aware of the law being used once. Again, not maybe necessarily the felony hazing, but we are not aware of the district attorney in Center County bringing up hazing charges against anyone. And there's documented situations.
Yeah, I mean, this has to change. And you bring up a good point that many of these judges might even not really understand what hazing is. And up until, Christmas, we really didn't, we had 50 different definitions of what hazing is by state. So it's all over the map. And students are telling me, Mike, I don't even know what hazing is. I don't know where the line is. And so they don't even understand what this concept is. And now finally, we have this bipartisan bill. It's called the Stop Campus Hazing Act, was signed into law as of December. So what was your family's reaction when it passed through Congress and was finally signed into law?
Well, we were certainly happy and we were relieved because we had spent so much time down in DC and it was becoming, somewhat monotonous without movement. So I was getting a little angry at that point. But
Mhm.
so the relief was there, and then it was kind of like, all right, what's next? What else are we going to do? Um, because that law, I think, is only going to do so much. It's going to require reporting. It gives us a definition of hazing.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily a deterrent, but it does provide transparency into organizations at universities so that parents and kids could talk about what organizations they're going to join before they join. Um, but the law itself, again, I don't think it'll cause a deterrent. People are still going to go to Penn State or Ohio State or whatever the university that they were looking at. It will help them hopefully make better decisions, though. And hopefully the nationals will take a look at it and say, hey, on XYZ campus, we're seeing too many reporting issues with you guys. Let's get this under control.
hmm Well, let's talk about that transparency. I think that's really important. So, for those who don't understand the Stop Campus Hazing Act, it did provide a federal definition. So, I think that is absolutely a win, and we should celebrate that. It also said that campuses now have to do research-based hazing prevention education. Number two, also very, very important. And the third piece is that a level of transparency. The universities now have to list all of the hazing behaviors on their college campus by organization so that way parents and students can look at that and then make decisions on which organization they want to join. And to Jim's point, then maybe the national fraternities are also going to look at that list and say, wait a minute, what is going on this campus? Like this is more than just an occasional problem. And then maybe make decisions in terms of where they go and where they expand to. But here's the problem. In my recent research in the dissertation, it's published, and so everyone can take a look at that on ProQuest. But we saw a university hire an external hazing prevention expert, and they sent the students on their campus to this external expert in the hopes that the situation was going to be resolved. Why? Because the students wouldn't talk to the university, and they also risk getting themselves or their organization in trouble, which was your point with Tim, right? That they really didn't reach out for help because they were afraid of getting themselves in trouble or the organization in trouble. So, in that scenario, the hazing behavior on this campus never made it onto the website, which is exactly what the Stop Campus Hazing Act requires. So I'm wondering, how do we get students to come forward and report if they are completely afraid of retaliation from other students on campus or getting themselves in trouble?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I mean, I think it's a fine line that the universities and the national thread thread the needle because you're right. Students don't want to get in trouble. But also there are many students that see there's issues going on. They see there's problems, and they should feel safe that they're not going to get reported or retaliated against. And I think the schools need to do a better job of enabling anonymous reporting, enabling keeping it anonymous. Same with the nationals, and where somebody gets the help that they need. I think the universities and the nationals need to take that into consideration when they're assessing a penalty organization or something. But I think they need to take that into account as well. It's tough, but parents also need to play a key role and talk to their kids and say, look, the right thing here is you report it. The right thing is you call for help if somebody needs it. You don't worry about whether you're going to get in trouble. A lot of students are afraid of what their parents are going to say. I think the parents really need to talk to their kids about what being a good human being is. Because if you saw somebody lying on the side of the road, surely you would call, right? Surely they would call if they didn't inflict the injury on them. Unfortunately, I think too, universities just need to have, somewhat of a zero tolerance for the bad behavior. The nationals will point to the universities and they'll say, the universities need to do more. And then when the universities do more, the nationals like, well, you're being too restrictive. So, I mean, there's got to be a meeting of the minds as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, this gets at some of the problems we see with bystander intervention is that sometimes, if somebody is hurt, let's say a car accident on the side of the road, and you're driving by at 60 miles an hour and you're late for work, then you might not pull over because you assume that somebody else is going to handle it. Somebody else is going to deal with that problem, right? So this is why we have bystander intervention training, so that way other students on campus will report it and then take accountability that I must do the right thing. I have to report this. And it's difficult. And we're talking about human behavior here. I mean, that's part of the issue. Now, recently I saw that, let's talk about Penn State, because the fraternities who are recognized by the Penn State IFC, they benefit from a whole bunch of things. They benefit from thon participation. They have Greek week, they have homecoming, they have Greek sign, they have leadership training, they have safety and accountability measures, they have community engagement in Greek's care, a first responders dinner, neighbor to neighbor. I mean, I can go on and on and on in terms of what you get for being in the Penn State IFC. Now, suddenly, we saw recently that there is now a new independent IFC that was just formed by three fraternities at Penn State. And I know that you and your wife, Evelyn, were extremely disappointed when that announcement came out. Please tell our audience, why were you so disappointed?
Well, I wouldn't say it's by it. I think, well, first of all, it's being driven, as far as I could tell. There's one individual who's an alumni participant at Sigma Chi who I think is driving it and behind it all, and he got these other two fraternities to join.
Mhm.
They were all suspended currently, and the leadership of this new IFC is going to be led by the presidents of the fraternities that were suspended. So they were on the watch when the thing got suspended. And by the way, none of them live in State College; they all live far away. But they're going to lead this new State College IFC allegedly. I think it's dangerous. I think students that join these organizations are going to open themselves up to liability, because if you disaffiliate from the university, you take them out of the equation if something goes wrong. They are not going to be liable anymore. So one of those deep pockets is gone. So now it's you individually and it's the nationals. And the fact that you disaffiliated, basically these guys are saying, well, you're too restrictive on us. We want to be able to do what we want to be able to do. We want to have more parties. We want to be able to do rush whenever we want it. Um, and that just opens it up to more dangerous behavior and more problems. And I just think it's a bad idea. I haven't come across many people that think it's a good idea. And frankly, we reached out to the leadership of Sigma Chi, um, because I think, to some extent they're driving it, and we had a relationship with them, as well as Penn State, and we're trying to broker a sit down to have Sigma Chi, walk it back and change their view. I don't know if it'll happen. Neither one of them has agreed to do the meeting, but we're going to be on campus end of April, and we asked them both if they would, get together and let's see what we could talk through. Because I do think there's a way forward here, and if we can get Sigma Chi out of it, the other two will collapse, I believe.
Yeah. Well, I hope that you do get that sit down at the end of April. I hope that you can have that conversation with Sigma Chi and with Penn State and come to a meeting of the minds to have a good resolution here. I did see, I mean, just earlier today, the Penn State IFC did start talking about some of the benefits of being in the Penn State IFC. So my hope is that people are going to see all of those benefits and are really going to associate and affiliate with organizations only that are recognized by the Penn State IFC. I think that is really, really important. And, I think if let's assume for a moment that there's another student on campus at Penn State that is considering starting, or forget about Penn State. Let's say they're just a student on another campus. They're thinking about starting a similar independent IFC because they're seeing what happened at Penn State and they're thinking to themselves, well, maybe that's a good idea for us because we also, don't like the restrictive rules. So, what is your advice to other students on other campuses that are thinking about doing the same thing?
Yeah, sure. I would say, why are you thinking about doing it? Are you thinking about doing it because you want to be able to have more parties? You want to be able to rush people in their first semester, or whatever it is you don't like about the university's rules? Is that why you're doing it? And does that really make sense? Have you talked to your parents about it? Because there are consequences. Again, you're opening yourself up to liability. And I also asked them to step back and think about it. Like, why are you at XYZ University? You're there to get an education. You're there to prepare yourself for the next 40 years of a career. Is that extra party per week, or is that rush period? Is that meaningful that you put yourself at risk when really the goal here is you picked this university to help you leap into the next 40 years of your life? And if you really sit down and think about it, unless your parents are not thinking through it, I gotta believe they're going to say, hey, let's do the smart thing here. We need to be governed by the university. We need you. You're 19 years old. You're 18 years old. We need some adult supervision in the room.
Yeah, I completely agree with that wholeheartedly. If you ask me what is a good fraternity, it's one that has some really good alumni supervision and guidance and mentoring that's happening on a regular basis. And I agree with you that if the students had this conversation with their parents and they're thinking about, moving to an independent IFC outside of the university, and they really understood what that means, that the parents would then say, you know what, this doesn't sound like a good idea to me. This really something's wrong about what you're doing, and advise them against that. But it starts with conversations with your parents, just like you said. I mean, if
Yeah.
those conversations are not happening, then obviously students can make decisions that might not be, in their best interests, and so that's
It's
problematic.
their first time. It's their
Yeah.
first time living on their own,
A
right? I
hundred
mean,
percent. I'm with you. I mean, listen, I got two kids in college right now, and yeah, it's their first time living alone, and they're trying to figure it out the best that they can. But it's those conversations, I think, with parents around these types of big decisions, I think are really, really critical. So you got to be having those conversations on a regular basis, talking about some of the subjects that we're talking about here. And along those same lines, what questions should parents and students be asking when their kid is thinking about joining a fraternity or a sorority?
well, I think they should talk to the organization and say, what violations do you have? What do you stand for? Um, what does your rush period look like? What does your pledge process look like? They should ask others on campus, like, what's the reputation of XYZ organization? Is it good? Is it bad? Do you know people there? Similarly, parents should, they should ask around as well. They should look at some of the social media chats about different organizations. And you'll find that some parents are pretty transparent about what's going on based upon what they heard from their kids. And other parents, they stick their head in the sand and they're like, oh no, no, that doesn't go on. It's such a tame bunch. But one thing I'm confident in is for the most part, whatever you hear from your kid is happening at their organization with Russian pledging, it's way more than what you're hearing. Um, you know, we've had friends who were with us in the hospital when Tim died, and they were talking about, my son's going through hell week next week, man. Like, oh my God, like you were there with us. How is hell week okay? It's a known concept that you're okay with, but so just do your diligence, talk to others and try to understand, what others are seeing.
Yeah. I mean, that whole Hell Week concept, I mean, it just makes absolutely no sense to me. I mean, if we frame this up as a relationship with, your soon-to-be wife, right? You're going to be getting married to her next week. And then suddenly the week before, we're going to treat her terribly. I mean, what kind of foundation is that for a lifetime relationship? I mean, it makes no sense.
Right. It's funny. I've come across so many alumni at this point over the years, just because we're out there talking about it all the time. And there's some that have fantastic. Other ones are like, I don't really talk to the guys anymore because it was kind of brutal when I was going through it. And, I look back on it and I really felt like we were abused and harassed. And it's just, it's not for me. So as the good ones always seem to be the ones that have the good, recall is where they had great experiences, where, the rush process, the pledge process was great, where the post pledge process was great. And there was none of this belittling or diminishing people's, you know, uh, personality. So, it doesn't build brotherhood to do some of these crazy things. It doesn't.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. The research is out there. Go and check out Aldo Semino's research. It does not build brotherhood or solidarity. The research is there in black and white. That just doesn't work. And I agree with you completely. I mean, that's the issue that I have is I do believe in fraternity. And I do believe it's the best leadership experience on a college campus, but it's when it's done right. And so I think you're seeing some alumni that had it done right and are leaders in every field in America, and are very
Right,
successful. But we obviously know also situations where fraternity is not being done right, and that's
right,
where we run into trouble. I think I've done a whole bunch of research here, and I've come up with a list of items that I think are going to help us to eliminate hazing. The dissertation talks about greater awareness of the Stop Campus Hazing Act. I don't think enough campuses and students really understand what that is. And that passed in December, and here we are at the end of March. I don't think they understand what that is. I think we need hazing prevention task forces on college campuses that have campus-wide representation. This is human phenomenon what we're talking about, Jim. This is not fraternity and sorority life only. We know that it happens in the ROTC. We know it happens in athletics. We know it happens in the band. So we need campus-wide representation from student affairs, from judicial, from campus police, from all of these other areas around campus. It can't just be that it's just fraternity and sorority life's problem and we're just going to put it all on them. That's not really helpful. We need that transparency, I think, in hazing cases from the universities, but also from the national organizations too. I think it's really important that we actually see it from a national organization standpoint, so that way we can see, okay, if my son is interested in joining this, fraternity, and he's considering two different campuses, I should be able to look on the national website and kind of get a feel for what's happening on various campuses. I'd also think we need a national database of the fraternity and sorority members to help with mentorship. Again, it goes back to having alumni keeping the students who are figuring this out for the first time on the straight and narrow. And there's a lot of campuses out there that are in remote areas of the United States that don't have a lot of alumni. But if we had this database, then we can pull and find other fraternity and sorority members who are living close to campus for more mentorship, advocacy, etc. I think the fraternity and sorority life offices, I think they're starved for resources. So many times they have thousands of students, and you only have one or two people that are in the fraternity and sorority life office. But when you put that up against athletics and you look at the staffing in athletics, I mean, these are not equal conversations, right? So unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the fraternity and sorority life offices, they're firefighters, not necessarily able to do the prevention work that you and I are talking about before somebody gets hurt. And I also think that we need to start educating on hazing prevention in K to 12. A lot of these students are experiencing hazing while they're in high school, and then they're
Right.
bringing it with them, that experience to the fraternity. So it's not the fraternity playbook. It's actually that they experienced hazing while they were in high school and brought that activity in to the fraternity and thought it was a good idea. And I've seen that firsthand. So I guess, laying all of that out there, is there anything that I missed? Is there something else that we can be doing to eliminate hazing?
Well, I mean, you said a lot there. The only thing I'm going to point out is most of the deaths are coming at fraternities, and it's because it's become so sensationalized with. I mean, you could start with Animal House and some of the other movies,
Mhm.
but some of the social media websites, it seems like people look at it and they're like, oh yeah, well if they could do it, we could do it. In fact, we can do it one up. So that doesn't help. That doesn't help, and the deaths do come largely in the fraternities. But I agree with you. It's not a fraternity sorority issue only. It's across all organizations. And I think again we need to have stiffer laws in place. Right now, I don't know. There's maybe 13 states with felony. There's some states that have no hazing laws. Um, we need prosecutors to bring students up on charges real time. If it happens, look, a lot of times it's going to be a slap on the wrist, but at least they were charged. Um, so they need to bring up charges. We need to see penalties enforced. Um, we need to have schools and nationals have a zero tolerance. Like there was one fraternity that I think was at Northeastern. They had a bunch of kids in a like a Home Depot truck with blindfolded and driving around the Boston area. And as far as I know, because I followed up, nothing happened to those individuals that put that together. In my opinion, they should have gotten rid of all the pledges and they should have gotten rid of all of the individuals that were involved in that hazing, but they didn't. It was like, it's kind of deemed harmless. We need zero tolerance. Like you got to kick them out of your organizations, kick them out of the university. People again, parents are going to start to say, "Whoa, I sent you to XYZ school to get an education, not to do this and not to get kicked out." So, um, you know, so I think all of that, the penalties and the zero tolerance are really, really important.
Yeah, I'm with you completely. I am seeing that fraternities are kicking out members responsible for any of these activities, but also it's on the universities to also kick them out as well. So
Right.
I think those two pieces need to go hand in hand. I'm with you on the prosecutors. Prosecutors, you guys got to do your job. You got to do your job and you got to charge them with what the law states. So
Right.
that is extremely important. We got to make sure that that continues to happen. You're right that there's a lot of satire out there, whether it be Total Frat Move or Neighbors, the movie, or Animal House. These are all movies that are designed to build satire and somehow glorify hazing behavior. And there's nothing glorified about it. Okay, this is mental and physical abuse, period, end of story.
Right.
And none of it works. None of it is useful or helpful in any way whatsoever. And you also don't know what trauma those students have been through before they got there to college. Okay.
Absolutely.
You have no idea. Don't even tell me you know what happened to that kid when he was 7, 8, or 9 years old. You have no idea. I'm just telling you, you have no idea, and you can trigger all kinds of problems because you don't know what he or she has been through. Okay? I mean, it's so, so important. So I think all of
And
those things,
and
yeah,
if I might add, you don't
yeah,
know what medications they're on. You don't
nope,
know what potential physical restraints they have. You don't know.
no,
So you could be putting somebody in a position to do something or take something that could kill them.
right.
And sure, you didn't intend it, but you didn't give them a choice. And don't tell me it's by choice. It's not by choice. They want to get into the organization. You hold the power. They're going to do what you ask them to do.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's really this two-tier system of the new members and the members of the organization. And so they're willing to put up with whatever because their need to belong is so great. That is why this is happening. And so, we'll just continue doing this research, continue doing this presentation, continue doing the education, continue in terms of the law, and the Stop Campus Hazing Act is absolutely wonderful. You're right about it being majority fraternities. A lot of the reason why this is happening is because another thing that the research went into is hazing looks different depending on which council you're talking about. So if we're talking about the IFC and traditionally white fraternities, 82% of hazing deaths involve alcohol. So if
Mhm.
the choice of hazing within these white fraternities, the IFC fraternities, is alcohol, then 82% of hazing deaths involve alcohol. So yes, by definition, these are the most riskiest, and this is why you see it happening within fraternities more often than not, is because there's, in those cases, it's a hazing death due to alcohol.
Right.
Different councils, they're going to haze slightly differently. It looks slightly different in Panhellenic. It looks slightly different in NPHC. So just understand there are differences. And again, it becomes on the student affairs professional to really understand what hazing looks like in all of these different councils. So that way they can prevent it from happening in the first place, that they can recognize that I see something on campus that I'm not comfortable with. But it's, really it's an education process. And a lot of the times the student affairs professionals, this could be their first job right out of college. And so they just don't have that experience to see it holistically in a bunch of different councils.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, the universities are understaffed for purposes of fraternity and sorority. In many cases, the individuals are not the strongest or the most experienced, and they may be reluctant. I've seen some of them that were more interested in becoming friends with the organizations rather than providing oversight and guidance. Um, I've seen some that operate wonderfully, and they are strong personalities and they are experienced, but I think that is the minority. I don't believe that's the norm.
Yeah. Well, I certainly appreciate all of this work. And, going forward, obviously, a lot of the fraternity and sorority members who are listening to us now, they certainly do raise a lot of money for various philanthropies. I mean, you see it at Penn State every year for child's cancer. If they want to get involved, and they want to continue to support this. I will say the Timothy Piazza Center for Fraternity and Sorority Research at Penn State is doing incredible work. I know all the people that work in that office, and they are absolutely incredible. They're brilliant, and they're doing some really, really important research. I saw, Jim, that you and Evelyn recently made a $50,000 donation to the Timothy Piazza Center for Fraternity and Sorority Research. So I'm assuming that students and parents, they can also make donations there as well to continue this important work.
Yes, they can. And that was our second donation because we believe in the work that's being done, and individuals, companies can make donations still. And the good news is right now it still gets matched by Penn State. So, a $5,000 donation is $10,000, and $10,000 enables them to do a good amount of research work. So, I highly encourage, Steve Veldkamp, who was the right guy for this job.
Yeah.
He's been working real hard to try to raise money, and he's done a good job, but he's got a lot of jobs within the organization, and fundraising is just one of them. So if we could all help him out by throwing something else in, that would be awesome.
Yeah, Steve is an amazing guy, and I completely agree with you. So, if there are companies who are listening to this interview right now, or there are students that want to raise money, that want to continue this research to prevent hazing in the future, please just go into Google, type in the Timothy Piazza Center for Fraternity and Sorority Research. It's at Penn State, and go ahead and make that donation because your money does go a long way. And if it's being matched by Penn State, that's free money.
That's
So, we got to take
money.
advantage of that any way that we can, right?
Right. Right.
Well, listen, Jim, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I think your words are going to go very far here today. So I really appreciate all the time that you've spent and everything that you and Evelyn and the rest of the parents too that we didn't even talk about. But
Right.
I really do believe that we owe you a huge debt of gratitude for the work that you've done. I don't think that the Stop Campus Hazing Act ever passes without your work, without Evelyn's work, without all the parents' work. None of that happens without you. And so I just want to say thank you on behalf of all fraternity and sorority members nationwide.
Well, thank you. And thank you for recognizing everybody else because it is a small army of us that are trying to get these things done. And one person, one couple can't do it. There's a bunch of us. And
Mm.
unfortunately, we were brought together through very bad circumstances. But
Yeah. All right. Well, Jim, all the best to you and Evelyn. Thank you so much for being here today. To the students who are listening right now, if you enjoyed this conversation with Jim, and I know that this, is a difficult topic, but it's important for more people to hear Jim's words. So what I want you to do is I want you to like it on social media, and I want you to share it with everybody on your campus. It is super important that they hear what Jim has to say because I think there's really critical stuff in this interview. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sharing and liking this. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.